big India Today exclusive. I'm being joined by the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us here on India Today. A big day, big few days for India. How do you look at India's G20 presidency? According to you, is this one of the most or the biggest and the most challenging G20 presidencies that you have ever seen?
So India's G20 presidency is exceptional. And yes, we live in very challenging and difficult times. The more India takes merit for mastering this G20 presidency, I think it's also due to the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. And what I experience here coming to the country is that there is a whole national effort to master the G20 presidency by the largest democracy we have on this globe.
Well, that's right. But there are issues. When it comes to consensus, the joint communique is far from becoming a consensus document. There are issues when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, when it comes to climate change. But let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. India says and is confident that there is going to be a joint communique on development. But on Russia-Ukraine war, they say that it is not their creation and not their concern. What's the European Commission's view?
So the G20 is an organization where we have the difficult topics on the table, and we need to find a consensus. And indeed, it is the big challenges. Of course, the spillover effects of the Russian war in Ukraine are on the table, like food security or the rise of prices of fertilizers, the lack of fertilizers, to name some elements. And we have to discuss that. I know that Russia might want to ignore it, but the others would not accept it.
When it comes to China, another country that has had obstructionist moves when it comes to climate change. There are other countries that are talking about climate change, so on and so forth. How does the European Commission look at a consensus document when it comes to climate change and tackling climate change?
So I think this time very important is the topic of climate finance. It's at the center of. We have to make sure that the needs of the heard and there's an answer. And for climate change, I think first the developed countries live up to their promise to $1 billion climate finance per year. The European Union share with $27 billion. Then there's the second element that we need to make sure that the multilateral financial system is being fit for purpose to also serve the needs of the developing world. And then we need to attract not only public finance to fight climate change, but also private capital. And here, besides the carbon pricing as a public resource revenue, there is the green bond market, for example, for private capital, or the topic of the trusted credit markets and the carbon credits. So all this has to be on the table.
President, ma'am, the fact that there are a lot of issues when it comes to a consensus document, I come back to the consensus document because that certainly is going to be one of the biggest takeaways from this challenging G20. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, millets, women-led development, all these India initiatives are now being objected by China. How do you look at China's obstructionist approach?
Well, what I see is that many of Prime Minister Modi's key initiatives have been introduced in the leader statement. And this is already a big success. And by the way, for example, the woman-led development is an initiative that I wholeheartedly support. So it's important to have this in.
Okay. A lot of quarters in India and outside are talking about what happens, is this India's success or a failure, if there's a joint communique and a chair summary. How do you look at it? What's your reading on a joint communique on development and maybe a separate chair summary on other contentious matters? Is that an acceptable move, or you'd like the Russia-Ukraine war as part of the document?
So I think, first of all, the first aim is to achieve a joint communique. This is important for G20, but of course there is always, as a second option of last resort, a chair summary. We start the negotiations, so we will see at the end of the G20 where we are.
Another very important aspect that has been an Indian initiative is inclusivity, allowing the African Union to become a part of the G20. How do you look at voice of the global south, the new world order being more reflected and representative in the G20?
I am a wholehearted supporter of the African Union being part of the G20 because Africa's voice has to resonate across the globe. This is very important. And for example, if you take climate change, Africa is emitting less than 4% of the global greenhouse gas emission, but is affected the most by climate change and has to offer the solutions to fight climate change. For example, with the topic of renewable energy, they have all the resources. So just one example how important it is to have the African Union at the table.
Madam President, another very important aspect is the food and energy crisis that the world is grappling with. Let's talk about energy. There are concerns or questions being raised post the Russia-Ukraine war of European countries buying Russian oil from third countries. Is that a concern? Is that something where Ukraine stands to lose?
So we have been very successful in the European Union to sanctioning fossil fuels from Russia to the European Union. There's almost no more fossil fuels that are being delivered from Russia to the European Union. This was a hard time. We went through a deep energy crisis, but we made it with the support of our friends and a massive investment in renewable energy. Very clear is also that products, refined products in third countries are not targeted by the sanctions. So that is fine. We want to be very clear on that. For us in the European Union, it was very important to get rid of the dependency of Russian fossil fuels, and we've achieved that.
And you did suffer a very harsh winter at that.
Yes.
But coming to the India-EU bilateral ties, a very important one. We've seen so many incoming, outgoing visits from India to the European Union, from European Union to India. Where do the ties stand? We still are waiting for a free trade agreement. What's the position and status on that?
Yes, I'm very excited that we have started the negotiations on a free trade agreement. We want an ambitious one. We want a comprehensive one. It is making good progress. Of course, work has still to be done to finalize this. It's a unique opportunity because for the European business sector, India is a very interesting, huge market, but vice versa for the Indian business sector. Of course, the single market in the European Union is also very attractive, very interesting. So we work hard and we want to deliver.
Is there a time frame?
Well, the next month will show how fast we are. I never give a limit time-wise because we have to see how negotiations go.
That's right.
But I'm very glad that they are progressing so fast. And on both sides, there's a positive attitude.
On that note, thank you so much for speaking with India today. Indeed, a pleasure.
Thank you very much.